The night I decided to drive through the empty mountain road was supposed to be quiet and simple. I had just finished a late shift, and the highway shortcut was the fastest way home. Fog slowly crept across the road like something alive, swallowing the trees one by one. My headlights barely reached a few feet ahead. That was when I noticed a man standing on the side of the road. He wasn't waving or asking for help. He was just standing there. His face was hidden in shadow. I slowed the car and rolled down the window, asking if he needed help. The man slowly turned his head toward me, but his eyes looked completely white in the beam of my headlights. Before I could react, he stepped forward suddenly. I slammed the gas pedal and drove away, my heart pounding. In the rearview mirror, I could still see him standing in the exact same place, watching the fog swallow the road again. A college student named Trevor moved into an old apartment building that had cheap rent and a strange silence. The first night seemed normal until around 2 a.m. when he heard something dragging across the floor above him. It sounded heavy, slow, and deliberate. The strange part was that the landlord told him the floor above was empty. Trevor tried to ignore it, but the dragging noise continued every night at the exact same time. One night curiosity took over, and he walked upstairs with a flashlight. The hallway was dark and dusty, clearly unused for years. As he walked forward, the dragging sound suddenly stopped. Trevor turned around and realized something chilling. The sound hadn't stopped, it had moved behind him. A woman named Claire worked as a night security guard at a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The place was huge and mostly empty at night. Her job was simple: walk around, check locks, and watch cameras. One night, while watching the monitors, she noticed a storage unit door slowly opening by itself. She thought maybe the wind pushed it open. But when she checked the camera again, she saw something that made her freeze. A tall figure stepped out of the unit, but the unit had been empty for months. The figure stood still, staring directly at the camera as if it knew she was watching. Claire grabbed her flashlight and went to check it in person. When she arrived, the door was closed again. But when she turned around, she heard a whisper behind her say her name. Ethan had just moved into a quiet rural house he inherited from his grandfather. The house was old but peaceful. On the first night, he heard faint knocking from inside the walls. At first, he thought it was pipes or animals. But the knocking started forming patterns. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. The same pattern every night at the same time. Eventually, Ethan knocked back. The moment he did, the knocking stopped. The house became silent. A few seconds later, the knocking started again, but this time it came from the floor beneath him. During a camping trip in a dense forest, 2 friends decided to record strange noises they had been hearing late at night. Their camera captured only darkness and trees swaying in the wind. Around midnight, a strange sound echoed through the woods, like someone slowly walking around their tent. One of the friends whispered that no one else was camping nearby. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent. Then the zipper began to move slightly, as if something outside was carefully trying to open it. A taxi driver working late nights once picked up a quiet passenger standing under a streetlight. The man wore an old coat and never spoke during the ride. The driver tried making conversation but received no response. After a few minutes, he looked in the rearview mirror and noticed the passenger staring directly at him with an unsettling smile. The driver quickly looked back at the road, unnerved. When he checked the mirror again a few seconds later, the back seat was empty. A teenage boy exploring an abandoned hospital with friends wandered down a hallway filled with broken equipment and dust. His friends stayed behind while he checked a dark room at the end of the corridor. Inside the room, he found an old wheelchair slowly rocking back and forth. No wind, no movement around it, just the chair moving slightly on its own. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered, and he heard someone whisper right beside his ear, "You shouldn't be here." A delivery driver once received an address deep in the countryside late at night. GPS barely worked, and the road became narrower with every mile. Eventually, he reached a small house surrounded by trees. The lights were on, but the place felt strangely quiet. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. As he turned back toward his van, he noticed something through the window. Several people were standing inside the house, all facing the door, perfectly still. A woman living alone began hearing footsteps in her attic every night. At first, she assumed animals were crawling around. One night, the footsteps became louder and more deliberate. She gathered the courage to climb the attic ladder with a flashlight. The attic was empty, completely silent. As she climbed back down, she heard the footsteps again, this time directly above her, even though she had just come from there. A night shift nurse working in a nearly empty hospital ward noticed one of the patient call buttons lighting up repeatedly. The strange thing was that the room belonged to a patient who had passed away earlier that evening. Assuming it was a system malfunction, she walked to the room to reset it. When she opened the door, the bed was empty, but the call button beside it was slowly being pressed down, as if by an invisible hand. A group of friends driving through a remote desert highway spotted a woman standing far off the road waving for help. They stopped and asked if she needed a ride. She silently nodded and got into the back seat. The ride remained quiet until one friend turned around to ask where she needed to go. The back seat was empty, but the car door had never opened. A man working as a janitor in a large office building noticed that one particular elevator kept traveling to the top floor at night, even though no one was there. One evening, curiosity got the better of him, and he rode the elevator up when it moved. When the doors opened on the empty floor, the hallway lights flickered on one by one, as if something had been waiting for him to arrive. A young couple staying in a roadside motel heard someone knocking gently on their door around 3 a.m. When they looked through the peephole, no one was there. The knocking continued every few minutes. Finally, the man opened the door quickly, hoping to catch whoever was playing the prank. The hallway was empty, but when he closed the door again, they both heard knocking coming from inside the bathroom. A security camera technician reviewing footage from a warehouse noticed something strange. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., one camera would glitch for a few seconds. During one playback, he paused the frame and saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the room. When the video resumed, the corner was empty again. The next night, when the camera glitched again, the figure appeared closer. The final story comes from a man who lived alone in a small cabin near a lake. He often heard splashing sounds outside late at night, as if someone was walking through the shallow water. Thinking it might be animals, he ignored it for weeks. One night, he looked out the window and saw a human-shaped silhouette, standing waist-deep in the lake staring at the cabin. The figure didn't move for several minutes. When the man finally blinked and looked again, the figure was standing right outside his window. And the strangest part about all these stories is that the people who experienced them all described the same feeling afterward. The feeling that whatever they encountered wasn't just passing through. It was watching, waiting, and maybe even following them long after the night ended. The man who lived in the cabin tried to convince himself that what he saw outside the window was just a trick of the darkness. His hands were shaking as he slowly stepped away from the glass. The lake outside had become completely silent, the gentle sounds of water gone, as if the entire place was holding its breath. He waited a few seconds before gathering enough courage to look outside again. The shoreline was empty. The dark water reflected the pale moonlight, calm and undisturbed. For a moment, he felt relief spreading through his chest. Maybe it really had been nothing. Then he heard something behind him. A slow dripping sound echoed from the wooden floor of the cabin. At first he thought maybe water from the sink was leaking, but when he turned around his stomach dropped. Wet footprints were appearing one by one across the floor, forming a trail from the front door toward the hallway. Each footprint looked fresh, as if someone had just stepped inside after walking through the lake. But the door was still locked. The footprints stopped a few feet away from him. And then, in the quiet darkness of the cabin, he heard a faint breathing sound coming from directly behind his shoulder. The man slowly turned his head, every muscle in his body stiff with fear. The cabin felt colder than before, and the air around him seemed heavy and thick. For a moment he saw nothing but the dark hallway stretching into silence. Then the floor creaked softly, as if something invisible had shifted its weight. His flashlight flickered in his trembling hand, casting weak shadows along the walls. The wet footprints on the floor suddenly continued forward again, one step at a time, moving deeper into the house. The man realized something terrifying in that moment. Whatever had come from the lake was now inside with him. Afterwards,